What? Gonna say we run you down.
All right. Whew. New mic.
Tonight, there are multiple breaking stories as we come on the air. Canada is about to impose visa requirements on Mexican visitors.
That is incredibly disappointing.
What we've learned about the sudden move and possible retaliation. Pharmacists say Shoppers Drug Mart pressured them to bill for services patients did not need.
That was the last straw that broke my back because I would not do it.
Accusations of borderline abuse in a CBC News exclusive. And they spent decades in prison for a murder they didn't commit.
We're free. We're due to go from here.
We break down how they were finally set free.
So you found proof that the police had been paying the main witness.
Yes. It was incredible.
And why their fight still isn't over.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us on a very busy Wednesday night. We begin tonight with a sudden change that will affect thousands of travelers coming into Canada. Our colleagues at Radio Canada have learned Ottawa is reimposing visa requirements for many Mexican visitors. And according to senior government sources, we can tell you it will take effect in just hours from now at 11:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday.
That is crazy. Like, so,
Kate McKenna now with details on the changes, who will be impacted, and what's behind it all.
Canada is about to reimpose a visa requirement on Mexicans for the first time since 2016. The move follows pressure from the U.S. government concerned that Mexican nationals are increasingly using Canada as a backdoor entrance into the United States.
We have an obligation to secure our borders.
Quebec's premier also called on the government to act.
I'm asking Mr. Trudeau to put again in place a visa for the Mexican.
Saying the province is struggling to integrate a sharp rise in Mexican asylum seekers arriving at the Montreal airport.
It is incredibly disappointing because it is a ongoing pattern of erosions of ability of human beings to come into Canada and seek asylum.
status for all. No one could be illegal on fucking stolen land. Like, this is absurd. This is absurd. And it's obviously just like, the wrong people are coming in, so they need to dampen the amount of people that are coming in. And that goes for Canada just using America as an excuse to carry this out. It's not a coincidence that the fucking Quebec premier is the one who outright called for a limit on Mexican visas. It's almost as if the feds are giving, concessions and placations to Quebec in exchange for, I don't know, support in an upcoming election. Yeah, it's purely scare tactics. It's just because they want to limit the amount of immigrants into an area where they want to have like a preferred class, right? And because Mexicans are not French, they're not they're the wrong kind of immigrant, so they're not being allowed in. Anyways, I don't want to go for like an hour and a half because I'm fucking, I don't even know, 12 seconds in basically, and I'm already losing my mind. This goddamn news makes me have a breakdown every time I watch it. Yeah, liberals seem to be doing, yes, that's exactly what it is. They're playing the game. And the thing that's crazy, the liberals do this thing that they are very savvy about, where they are willing to make themselves out to be the bad guy and to create this opposition from the left, right? Like status for all, like immigration reform. If you look at no, that's different though, right? Gaza is a thing that they don't have like the control over, right? But they do have these they're able to control these types of crises, and they're willing to oppose, like they're willing to be the bad guy, because what it does is it invigorates the left, and then that sets it up so that the left will always choose the lesser evil, right? Especially in our system, where you don't even have to actually choose. You just have to vote for your preferred candidate. And because of that, by externalizing themselves as a boogeyman, as like the bad guy, they then invigorate the left, who will then come back to the center, like to the liberals, when it comes time to maybe the conservatives will come into power, right? And so they always dangle, they invigorate the left, they're willing to play the bad guy, invigorate the left, and then when it comes time to their support starts to dwindle, they do the thing where it's like, you're either with us, you're with the fascists, and that sets them up where they get their 32.3%. That's all they need to hold government. And to do that, and to remain as a viable like holder of to form government, they need Quebec. And Quebec right now is in this position where they can say, look, we're not going to play ball with you. Watch you lose your government and let the conservatives take over, because what does it matter to us? We're a bi-judicial province. We don't have to fucking abide by most of your laws anyways. But if you want to stay in power, how about you give us a couple of concessions? Like, I don't know, make Mexicans not be able to get into Quebec so easily. And there you go. Now the Quebecers will come back to the table. Now the Bloc Québécois. And it's funny too, because the Bloc Québécois didn't ask for this. The conservative CAQ, Legault asked for this, right? So Legault can play the bad guy, and the Bloc say, this isn't what we want, but it is what they want. It's what everybody wants. It's just a layers of manufactured consent. Okay, I'm going to shut up.
Senior government sources say the new visa system will be less restrictive than the rules in place during the Harper government. A source says the visa requirement will affect about 40% of Mexican
It won't be as racist, we promise.
travelers and take effect at 11:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. There will be exemptions for people with work and study visas, including temporary foreign workers, and for Mexicans who held Canadian or American visas in the last 10 years. As for how it'll work, it'll take 4 to 6 weeks to get a visa. It'll require biometrics, and the visa will last 10 years, allowing people to stay a maximum of 6 months at a time. Even before Ottawa makes it official, Mexico's president is already expressing his...
All right. AMLO, let's hear it, buddy. He probably went on TV for like... AMLO is one of those guys, I love it. My friend Marisa, who is from Mexico, used to watch. He does these like addresses like this. Look, this is what he's doing. Since the pandemic, he's done these addresses where he stands in front of the fucking camera and talks for like 2.5 hours. And it's because he's a character. He's not even his politics are kind of off. He's a liberal, but because he's Mexican, he's still like got that anti-imperial about him. But it's just the way that he is able to. He's a good speaker, and he's also a personality, and he does these addresses that are just like these 2-hour addresses where he just really opens up and just like like monologues, self-journals. He's a streamer. Yes, he's streaming. AMLO, gotta love him.
Disappointment.
Quebec o no?
Threatening to boycott the Three Amigos summit this year. And Canada's tourism industry also warns this move could come with a cost.
Only in 2023, Mexicans contributed about $754 million to our visitor economy. And that is a significant amount that we want to keep on the books and not see it go away because of this new announcement.
So, Kate, March break isn't that far away. Lots of Canadians travel to Mexico. Is there any threat of retaliation here?
Well, we've just...
Yes, all-out war.
heard that Mexico is unhappy from the president himself, but Mexico has no incentive to retaliate by putting a visa requirement on Canadians.
Balkanization, baby. Let's go. We need the Quebec-Mexico war. Let's go.
Because that would greatly harm its own tourist industry. And we mentioned this all comes into effect Thursday night, meaning only Mexican travelers that are already in the air at that deadline will be allowed in without a visa.
All right, Kate McKenna in Ottawa, thank you. Now to a CBC News exclusive, Shoppers Drug Mart is being accused of taking advantage of a service designed to help patients in Ontario manage their medications. It's free for patients, but pharmacies bill the province. CBC News spoke to
the least shocking thing in the world. It's funny, though, speaking of Quebec, on the good side of Quebec, this thing that they do, completely illegal in Quebec. Private companies are not allowed to control, like, public healthcare information. Completely illegal. It's kind of shitty because, like, if I want to transfer my prescriptions from Ontario to Quebec, I have to, like, go through a couple of hoops to do it. But it prevents this monopolizing of the healthcare system. And it's a good thing.
Over half a dozen former employees who say Shoppers is pressuring pharmacists to bill for the service. Angelina King lays out the investigation.
Toronto pharmacist John Nan says med checks are valuable for patients if done appropriately. But he and other pharmacists we spoke to say in some cases the service is being exploited by Shoppers Drug Mart.
I worry that something like this really could set us back as a profession, as a healthcare system.
Nan says that...
You think, John? You think this might set us back? I'm pretty sure it set us back immensely. I'm pretty sure Ontario is a decrepit hellhole because of our decaying healthcare system. Pretty sure it's what motivated me to fucking leave Ontario.
That's partly why he left Shoppers last year. He says his manager shielded staff from the corporate pressure, but when a new person came in and introduced targets...
That was the last straw that broke my back because I would not do it.
Medication reviews are done across the country, but it appears the concern over how Shoppers is doing them is striking a chord most in Ontario, where the province allows meds checks to be done over the phone instead of in person as was required before COVID-19. That phone call can bring in up to $75, $37 more than a family doctor bills. A letter obtained exclusively by CBC News sent to Shoppers management from a group of Ontario pharmacy owners says the pressure to bill is borderline abusive and is creating safety concerns for the provision of good
This is the thing. In Quebec, we have Jean Coutu, and in Ontario, they have the fucking Baron, Galen Weston. Jean Coutu is like a philanthropist, a pharmacist dude who owns, like, still capitalist, but not a bloodsucker, you know? Galen Weston, literal bloodsucker, fixed the price of bread. This dude should not be allowed to own a business in this fucking country, let alone create a monopoly with our healthcare system. In many countries throughout the world, people who did this throughout history, very bad things happened to them.
Medical care.
Justified bad things.
Patients and customers.
I'm wondering what you or Shoppers has done to address those concerns.
So once again, we take those allegations very seriously. We are certainly continuing to follow up and review this.
Shoppers President Jeff Legier says there are no targets or quotas, and management does not pressure staff to bill meds checks. He says the service is having a positive impact.
We certainly see meaningful outcomes for patients based on our internal data. 4 out of 10 times, there's a positive intervention that's happening for patients.
Did he just say 4 out of 10 times? 4 out of 10 times? Let's check the videotape here.
Data, 4 out of 10 times, there's a positive intervention that's happening for a patient.
It was really...
What? He just said that like as if it was a good thing. You know, we're hitting about 40% of the time. People are having a good experience. The other 60% of the time, bad experience. But you know what? That's fine. We're okay with that. The other 40% is where the profits are coming in. And actually, you know what? People don't really have any other options in this province because like the public healthcare system is such shit. So we're kind of forcing them to use us. So like, you know, the 60%, fuck them. Really? You know, fuck them. 40% though, cha-ching, let's go. Yeah, and all that information. Think about that information, right? The actual service, they're probably willing to lose money on the actual service. That fucking data, all of that data that they're getting, think about how immensely valuable that data is to know everybody's fucking prescriptions. It's almost as if you would be able to like manufacture a monopoly on violence, on, you know, social angst and things like that by being able to know the overall population's like consumptions of their drugs, when and who, right? Like the amount of information that is coming out of these types of fucking apps is beyond the amount of the profit, right? Like the profit is aside. It's that information that is legitimately being like collected illegally in other parts of the world, in other countries, even in this country, in other provinces. Private companies aren't allowed to do this. But you know what? Ford, just like it says, this is why I created this. I created this banner the night that Ford got reelected. And it's just been downhill from there to the point where I had to fucking exodus the province. But Ontario crumbles under Doug Ford's new brand of neoliberal capitalism. It's fucking maple Reaganism.
Really uncomfortable.
This former Shoppers pharmacy assistant says the pressure to cold call patients to schedule meds checks is partly why they quit. CBC isn't identifying them because they now work for a different Loblaws own. Yeah, age of surveillance capitalism, but this is a... I mean, that's how the CIA essentially works, right? That's how like intelligence works, is it's just money. That's how the Zionist lobby works. That's how the Mossad works, is it's just all the money, right? The tech, the money makes it so that putting money into people's pockets overrides, including the politicians, overrides anybody's rights. So in doing that, you know how people say like sometimes it feels like we're living in a simulation. Well, that's why, because we literally have given all of our like the essence of our like all of our choices, all of our expressions of our identity, which is only through capitalism. Amazon, these fucking drug companies, so many different things, right? It's all
we live in a matrix that the profit is aside, right? Yes, of course. In-Q-Tel, I was thinking about this yesterday, but like the people who created PageRank, which is like the industry that I work in, were connected to the fucking CIA. You know what I mean? Like but the problem is, I mean, it's essentially not a problem, but the good thing about this is that with neoliberalism is that all of this ends up getting siphoned off to the highest bidder. And eventually that highest bidder will be fucking Chairman Z. So trust the plan, essentially. And they do their age of surveillance capitalism far greater than we do. And I'm fully willing to submit myself to the fucking to their social credit algorithm than the one that we're being fucking subjected to, because the one that we're subjected to is destroying us, right? The one that they are subjected to is literally meant to keep their society together, and it also isn't like individualistic, right? It awards people for their like collectivist approach to things, which is the exact opposite of what we do. And that's the thing. That's the beautifulness of all of these terrible shit that's happening with the accelerated neoliberal capitalism, is that it's all decaying straight into the hands of the fucking Chinese Communist Party, which own all of these state-owned enterprises where they have like 40% stake in them, you know, and then they slowly gain, they become a conglomerate, and they lower the amount that they own and then buy it up again. And that's what just happened in China with they recently had like an economy shrink, and what they did is they essentially just bought up. They used the state capital to buy up more of stakes in their private enterprise, which then shrinks their economy, which then, guess what, makes class divide smaller, which, guess what, is still capitalism, but is moving towards a collectivist society. It's almost as if there's like a name for that. Anyways, back to this fucking hellhole.
Owned pharmacy.
I didn't feel like I was really serving the community in a helpful manner.
I thought it was odd.
Mary
No shit, you work for Shoppers Drug Mart. How did you think you were serving the community?
Fernando says she didn't realize she was even getting a meds check at first when her Shoppers Pharmacy called and asked a few general questions about her routine medications.
That is bothersome, to have something that was charged that was unnecessary.
Angelina, this is really interesting. What is the province of Ontario saying about all of it?
Yep, exactly. And more and more you will see this type of technology that they're going to implement that's going to undermine the hegemony, you know, the closed system, right? The more and more we globalize, because this is what we wanted, right? And now China is going to say like, okay, we'll play your game. We play your game much better than you do, and we have far more fucking better more access to resources and human capital to be able to do this. And we're actually all bought into a social plan, like a social project, because we've been bought into a social project for 2,000 fucking years. So, yes, let's do capitalism to the point of destroying it. And people don't see this, right? Because it just looks like capitalism, but that's the point. That's the point. Because otherwise, you know what would happen? War. We would go to world war. But because Chairman Z is a smart person, he's siphoned all of that investment to China from America so that there can't be war. Because if the U.S. tries to do anything to China, they're hurting their own investment, right? And so they can't do anything. And so that's why you just have to trust the plan and watch the decay happen, because there'll always be these ramping up of tensions, but there can never be an actual conflict because so much of Western capital is invested in China. If anything were to happen to make that not be a thing, America would implode. And there's no chance that, and the global market entanglement is what makes it so that they can't back out when it comes to the point of conflict. All they can do is say, hey, you're here now, good luck, like, this is what you wanted, this is what you've done to the rest of the world, now we're going to do it to you. And the thing about it is that it's not going to work. Like, it's not going to happen the same way because China isn't doing colonialism, right? They're doing the fucking Belt and Road. They're lifting people up. So, do you think that like Indonesia is going to be against globalized markets when China is in charge? No, because they're not going to do it the same way that America did it. Brazil, Peru, Argentina, once they don't have a freak in control, be a lot easier to do it too once they've had the freak out of power and they can see how bad it can get when you have a neo-libertarian freak. Anyways, the China thing always sets me off.
So today, Ontario's health minister responded to this story, saying that the government's going to do its due diligence to make sure the program is used appropriately. Now, last fiscal year, Ontario...
Yeah, we are in a Cold War, and COVID was a part of it. Also, that near meltdown in Bowmanville, the summer of 2019, I believe it was probably a part of it. The thing is that China probably has on numerous occasions shown the West, like when you go to press the button isn't going to work because we control everything. And that's probably amounted to things, I'm going completely off the fucking rails here, but that's probably amounted to things where the US has had to do things like COVID to say, we're going to attack you with a bioweapon and then say you attacked us, right? And so they have to do these things that is always like harming themselves, but with the intent of the greater harm being towards China and the East. Same with the war in Ukraine, right? Like, and it's always, that's the thing though, is that it's unsustainable and they are literally just sleepwalking into their own demise. It is their victory that defeats them. And the Chinese know that. That's the thing. And so there'll never be that conflict because China knows that they can just keep giving them a little bit more racetrack to keep, digging themselves a deeper and deeper and deeper hole for their race car to come apart. That's a good analogy. Yeah, giving them more and more racetrack to let them have more time for the fucking vehicle that they're driving to fall apart because they don't want the conflict. They just want the decay. And it's like the fucking Sopranos. The decay is certain. And that's the thing, is like the death is almost too unbearable. Like, America would rather destroy themselves than have to live with the idea of being second fiddle, right? And so that's why China has to mitigate that death drive of America, because they know that the West is, suicidal, and that they are willing to destroy themselves just because they aren't capable of living in a world where they're not the dominant power structure. And so China has to, that's the global market entanglement, because they know there's no other way to do this peacefully without wrapping ourselves into their situation, so that they always think that they're in control until they're not anymore. And then by the time that they're not anymore, hopefully they don't have the fucking ability to destroy the planet.
Billed $60 million in meds checks. We don't know how much of that went specifically to shoppers. I asked the president about that, and he didn't have those numbers when I spoke with him. Now, the Ontario College of Pharmacists says that it's aware of some general concerns that some pharmacists may be feeling pressured to perform certain services, including meds checks. They said that they're launching a series of town halls to try and kind of get a better understanding of the issue.
Okay, more to come on this. Angelina, thank you. There are calls tonight for Canadian banks to crack down on online abuse. It comes after a CBC News investigation into a case of intimate partner violence. As Katie Nicholson explains, for as little as a penny, abusers can send a hate-filled...
See? Here's the thing to try to police the third party. This is the problem for the imposed solution of trying to close off the markets with things like WePay, right? It's always create this fear that's somehow connected to some insane thing like child abuse or sexual harassment that then connects the technology that is destabilizing the country or the socio-political system to then make it so that there's this imposed, this willingness, this publicly imposed will to stop it, which is purely manufactured. And that's all the CBC does. So much of this is these setting up the stage for the problem for the imposed solution to be brought in. It's a network of manufactured consent.
Message through e-transfers.
Angie Sweeney blocked her ex on every platform.
Email, social media, phone.
But an hour before he killed her, he found another way, attaching abusive messages to e-transfers for small amounts of money, like this one for 1 cent. It horrified her friends.
He was probably thinking oh my God, I thought I had myself locked down and safe.
Abusive e-transfers were such a big problem in Australia during the pandemic, banks had to crack down.
Did you know you can report abusive transactions?
Commonwealth Bank also launched a filtering program, which blocks 400,000 abusive messages a year.
Number 1.
It's so successful, it's offered its technology.
See? We need to crack down on the way that we send people money. We never know. You never know where that yen is coming from.
Free to other banks. Another bank down under introduced this reporting tool. Now, advocates in this country want Canadian institutions to follow suit.
I think banks in this country should be taking those steps immediately.
We reached out to all major Canadian banks and Interac to see what they had in place to prevent this type of abuse. Only TD and Interac responded. Both said anyone experiencing abuse should notify their bank. E-transfers are a particularly insidious way to send abusive messages because the target is often owed child or spousal support.
Oftentimes, a survivor has to decide on if they're going to actively resist and put up and view these harassing and threatening messages or not be able to put food on the table.
The federal government says its new online harms bill doesn't apply to abusive e-transfers.
Our new online harms bill doesn't apply to this, but we'll make the fervor so that it soon does.
But threatening messages do fall under the criminal code. The thing is, many survivors are reluctant to get involved with the criminal justice system.
It's one of the reasons Angie Sweeney's friends hope the banks stop abusive messages before they are sent.
Any kind of change that can come about in a positive manner from this tragic situation, maybe somebody else won't have to go through something that, she went through.
And one less avenue for abusers to target survivors. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to decide if Donald Trump is immune from prosecution on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 election. So the decision means one of his criminal cases will be delayed significantly. Justices will hear arguments on April 22nd, but Trump faces a new legal challenge tonight. An Illinois state judge barred him from that state's ballot over his actions on January the 6th. And a stunning announcement in the U.S. Senate. Republican Mitch McConnell, the longest-serving Senate leader.
How is it stunning? He's the longest-serving Senate. longest serving Senate leader. He's probably been an elected official for fucking like 50 years. Not stunning. The dude should have been resigned at least a decade ago during Obama.
Ever announced he's stepping down in November.
One of life's most underappreciated talents is to know when it's time to move on to life's next chapter.
What was it for you, Mitch? Was it the having a stroke on camera on numerous occasions? Falling down the stairs, showing up during the pandemic with bruises all over your face because you injured yourself. What was it, Mitch?
McConnell has been in that leadership position for...
And all the Democrats are just like, yeah, we love this man. This is a house of bipartisanship. We love this ghoul. He's one of us.
17 years, he just turned 82, has visibly struggled lately, but aides say the announcement was not related to his health.
Of course it wasn't.
A cluster of out-of-control wildfires are ripping through northern Texas tonight. The area affected is mostly rural, sending people and livestock fleeing. Chris Reyes now with the inferno and how it's upending people's lives.
Intense and moving fast, this was the harrowing escape route for so many in northern Texas.
It looked like Armageddon. It looked like our town was just being engulfed in black, and it was just disappearing right before us as we were driving in our rearview mirrors.
For some, the mad dash to safety meant leaving everything behind.
We basically have lost everything. This is the only pair of pants I've got. The shirt, that's it.
My mother's home, unfortunately, has burned to the ground, and there's absolutely nothing left.
The fires ignited Monday in the state's panhandle where about 500,000 people live. Warm, dry, and windy conditions fanning the flames.
Lots of what we say fuel in the area, and that's going to be...
Panhandle. It's always these places that make up, good vacation areas that end up getting these fires. That, I know that sounds crazy, but it's not as crazy as you think it is for climate change to make it where like preferable areas for colonization are easier to be destroyed because of the continued dryness and the type of dryness that is not known to that area. And because of that, when the seasonal heat picks up, the dryness that is not common for that area makes it so these fires, it's like a microwave, right?
All of your dry grasses from this past winter that were just sitting out there in the plains and in the fields.
The biggest blaze spread fast, quickly growing to more than 3,000 square kilometers, even crossing state lines. In the Texas city of Canadian, where residents are slowly coming back, they know there's a long recovery ahead.
The roads have all been reopened. The evacuation orders have ceased. Everyone is back in their homes and do it well, the ones that still have a home.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has issued a disaster declaration for 60 counties in the state, activating resources for struggling fire.
Many of them without sleep. They're doing everything they can
to contain wildfires that continue to grow and could break records if not put out soon. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
CBC News has learned the Canadian government will begin airdropping aid into Gaza. Ottawa is still working on logistics, but it's expected to happen within the next week.
Why not just have a ceasefire so that it doesn't need to be airdropped?
So these are images of a drop Jordan performed on Monday. Many previous air deliveries have been carried out by the Jordanian Air Force. Canada is...
Why are they dropping it into the ocean, though?
Not considering using a Canadian Armed Forces aircraft for the operation. And we have a clearer picture tonight about why 2 scientists linked to China were escorted out of Canada's top infectious disease lab in 2019 and fired. Hundreds of pages of secret documents have
Here we go.
just been released. We're still going through them, but Karen Pauls takes us through the story they tell.
Subsequent termination of the employment of 2 scientists.
After years of questions and political wrangling, the moment of truth. Documents released detailing why Jianguo Chu and her husband Qiting Cheng were fired from the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg.
They weren't disclosing information, they weren't disclosing relationships, that the nature of other work that they were conducting wasn't being disclosed.
Good morning. Chu was part of an award-winning team that developed Canada's Ebola vaccine. Now, intelligence assessments also show she and her husband shared infectious viruses and scientific research with China, had a close and clandestine relationship with Chinese officials, and were considered a credible threat to Canada's economic security.
They were probably developing a fucking weapon to use on them, and they told them. That's probably what happened.
The documents also say she lied about her involvement with Chinese government and military programs. In January 2021, both she and Cheng had their security status revoked and were fired in letters saying, "You can no longer be trusted to safeguard information, assets, and facilities. You cannot be relied upon not to abuse the trust and not pose a security risk to the Government of Canada and PHAC." We've never been able to talk to Chu or Cheng, and no one answered their door today.
Will he acknowledge Espionage was involved in the Winnipeg lab incident?
For years, the opposition has fought for details to be released, accusing the government of using national security to shield itself from embarrassment.
I mean, that would be a national security matter, would it not be? Right? If the Conservatives were in power and this happened, it would still be brushed under the rug because of a matter of national security. That's just how this works.
Health Minister says the threat of Chinese influence wasn't as well known at the time.
I do think there was a lax adherence to security protocols. I think that there was an inadequate understanding of the threat of foreign interference. I believe that an earnest effort was made to adhere to those policies.
I would love to know about the foreign interference that China has to deal with on Canada's behalf, because it's probably tenfold, you know? And we're only getting one side of the story here, right? So there'll be more to come with this, I'm sure. But I guarantee you this is going to trace back to COVID. This is the double blackmail can kick down the road where this story is going to keep leading towards something, and it's going to unravel some type of narrative, either good or bad, for the Canadian state. But it seems bad.
Policies, but not with the rigor that was required.
But security experts are skeptical.
We knew a lot and had known a lot for at least a decade about Chinese foreign interference.
The thing that's funny about this is that if she had security clearance, couldn't she be charged with perjury because of violating the security clearance? Beyond just getting fired, if you had a security clearance and you violated it with a foreign body, that would make you that would make you on the hook for charges. So it seems like they're covering more. There's more to this story than what we're being told, obviously. But you don't just fire someone for committing espionage. It's beyond just a fireable offense.
Activities in Canada, a lot of concern at that time, and so there's really no excuse.
As for the lab, it says it's beefed up its security protocols and its rules for collaborating and sharing research with other countries. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The family of an elder
Sharing research with other countries about vaccines. Probably not a good thing.
couple is demanding answers after the seniors were left without a phone line for weeks.
I actually couldn't remember my own number, and I reacted in crisis.
Why critics say it is unacceptable. A hospital is hoping to reach more Black women for cancer screening.
My first thought was I'm going to die.
The tests that could save lives. And remembering a comedy star.
You never call me. You always pick the restaurant. Are we married?
We're back in 2.
R.I.P. to a legend.
Comedian Richard Lewis, known for his dark and self-deprecating humor, has died at the age of 76. His long-running stand-up career ended last spring when he shared his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. But Lewis was still on TV in a recurring role on HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm.
You never call me. You always pick the restaurant.
Are we married? I don't understand. Am I dating you?
You hate people. Your wardrobe
I do,
sucks.
so what? My wardrobe.
In a statement, Curb creator Larry David said Lewis was like a brother to him. Lewis died after...
Comrade Larry David 2024, trust the plan.
Suffering a heart attack at his home in LA. New research out tonight suggests the privatization of healthcare around the world, including here in Canada, could come at a cost to patients, a cost to the quality of care they're getting.
Breaking news. Can you believe it? It's almost as if privatization is bad for public health care. Wow. Incredible. I could never have guessed that. Tell us more, Adrian.
Christine Birak explains why.
We all need health care, and governments are increasingly paying private for-profit companies to deliver parts of it, not just in Canada, but in countries around the world.
I would be concerned that it will come at the cost of the quality of the healthcare they receive.
A newly published review from Oxford University examined the effect of healthcare privatization on the quality of care. It analyzed 13 studies from 8 countries, including Canada, Sweden, South Korea, and the U.S. While rare in Canada, researchers found hospitals converting from public to private ownership tended to make higher profits, primarily through treating healthier patients and reducing staff. Researchers also found, while they didn't directly follow patients, privatization in larger areas or regions frequently corresponded with worse health outcomes for patients.
So there's a little bit of cherry picking going on there.
This Canadian doctor argues the review includes too many U.S. studies. He says more for-profit care will increase access.
We're trying to say, how do we reduce?
We've talked to this bootlicker doctor who's probably deeply invested in private healthcare to give a comment on how the decay of the public health system isn't actually because of private healthcare. Let's hear more from this bootlicking freak.
Wait times. We've really never had a problem with quality of care in terms in our hospitals.
This economist said,
Blatant lie, absolute blatant lie. Yes, we have had a decline in quality of care. Fucking absurd to say otherwise.
as the Oxford Review backs up what many experts understand.
They say it out loud. They say the quiet part out loud. You can't be a for-profit service provider without putting profit first.
Cutting staff, lowering pay, picking profitable patients makes money.
If you think your government is going to get a better deal by creating for-profit incentives or paying for-profit providers through public funds, you're going to get worse care and worse jobs.
With several provinces pushing for more private for-profit care, Oxford researchers say this could be an important time that decides what the future of healthcare in Canada looks like. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto hospital wants more Black women to access genetic cancer testing. The early screening tool can catch the disease before many may notice symptoms on their own. Tashana Reid now on the push to save more lives.
At age 34, Alicia Bryan discovered a lump. Her diagnosis, stage 3 breast cancer.
My first thought was I'm going to die.
After a lumpectomy and 8 rounds of chemotherapy, she did a genetic test to find out her risk of the cancer coming back.
I do have a family history of breast cancer, but it's not something I was aware of at the time.
Genetic testing looks for a mutation to the BRCA1 or BRCA2 genes, commonly known as BRCA, by a simple saliva or blood test. If detected, it means a significantly greater lifetime risk for developing cancers such as breast, ovarian, or prostate.
I mean, it's not something that most people are aware of.
Alicia carried the BRCA2 gene. She opted for a preventative mastectomy.
I wanted to take a really aggressive step to make sure that cancer didn't recur.
By catching it very early, you're able to change the path of that disease. So you're actually able to literally save lives. We offer genetic testing because it's information that can empower.
This Toronto hospital has launched a campaign to bring awareness about genetic testing to Black women,
So this is the tube that your saliva goes into.
who researchers say are vastly underrepresented in genetic screening.
We see these genes occurring in all ethnic and racial communities, but what we do realize is that the knowledge about these genes is lower than it should be in the Black community.
Black women with breast cancer face poorer health outcomes. This doctor says genetic screening could improve that.
There's a risk of more aggressive breast cancer that presents at younger ages, like triple-negative breast cancer, and it tends to be harder to treat.
Provincial healthcare plans cover genetic testing for patients with cancer or a known family history. Or for hundreds of dollars, people can self-test through a private company.
Having access to genetic testing is key, or at least knowing that it is available.
It's a tool that Alicia says offered her a
Did you see what they just did there? They literally did an infomercial for private healthcare. It is key to have at least knowing that it's available. AKA, if you have the money for it, you should use it. If you don't, guess you're shit out of luck. Sorry. Enjoy your cancer. Maybe you can get on a wait list.
path forward to focus on the future. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
2 New Brunswick men who spent years in prison for a murder they did not commit tell us what it took to be believed.
This is my... I already have inflicted so much of my allotment of psychological damage for what my capacity for has been reached. But I do want to see this story about these 2 wrongfully convicted people who apparently the police were paying a witness to lie for them. So I do want to see this, but I think that'll be it once we see that story. But I bet they'll kick the can down the road and go to commercial, and then our moment will be like a fucking story about like a cat or something.
The only thing kept me going for the first 10 years was probably revenge.
Why their fight is not yet over.
I think that they should at least recognize what they've done.
And Afghan migrants in Pakistan are living in fear as a critical deadline looms.
We have been explaining this to the government of Canada, but nobody's hearing us. It is unbearable.
The National breaks down the story shaping our world. Next. But first, why innocent men serve time for murder.
Yeah, they didn't have nothing on me.
They've cleared their names at long last, but the pain of injustice remains.
Where do we go from here?
This is the breakdown. The case against them was disturbingly corrupt. Nick Purdon breaks down the long fight for a legal victory that is bittersweet at best.
Well, when they said not guilty, I never got the feeling that I really want it, because I know it's overshadowed by cancer, them dying. I'm Robert Millman. I was convicted 1983, 84 for killing a man I knew nothing about. Here we are 40 years later. We are not guilty.
Walter Francis Gillespie. I was charged for second-degree murder. And on January the 4th, we were found not guilty on a second-degree murder.
Robert Mailman and Walter Gillespie. Two innocent men who spent half their lives fighting for their freedom. And on January 4th, 2024, they finally got it.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the judge here for doing this. We're free. I don't know. I mean, it's over with. I mean, where do we go from here?
You sue them heavily for all the fucking states got. Sue their goddamn pants off. You didn't sign it. You didn't Alfred plea. You didn't plead out and get your sentence, whatever the word is, repealed. I don't know. I forget what it is. But you didn't Alfred plea. You got a not guilty. So, I mean, you spent 40 years in prison. You should probably sue the fucking goddamn government.
How is it possible that these two men got life sentences for something they didn't do?
Happens a lot, actually. Corrupt legal system. Let's find out, though.
To understand what happened, we need to go back to a murder that took place 40 years ago. November 1983. The burned body of George Lehman was discovered here in this park.
Could be. See, I don't know for sure if this is the right spot.
Walter Gillespie wants to show me the exact spot where the body was found, because what happened here changed his life forever.
Maybe here, maybe.
Gillespie keeps searching, because with all the lies and the fabrications in his murder case, he likes to be accurate.
No, I don't know. I really can't tell you for sure. I'll call Bobby, maybe he might know how far it was.
Gillespie calls Robert Bobby Mailman. Anything to do with their case, they consult each other.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm at Fisher Lake, and I don't know where the spot is. Do you remember how far out it was?
Right to the gate.
Right there by the gate?
Yeah, right to the gate. You walk right down through the woods.
I called Bobby there, and
what did he say?
He pointed me to the direction, and he said it's right there by the gateway.
Nobody knows for sure why George Lehman, a 55-year-old plumber, was murdered, but it came up at trial that he may have been involved in drug trafficking.
I mean, you think that's a bit of a trail there, eh?
Yeah.
So this is where the police said you dropped the body, the dead body.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
But you were never here.
No, never here.
It's remarkable, eh? All that about something you didn't do.
Yeah, they didn't have nothing on me, not a thing. Just that I was there. They said I was there.
In January 1984, the police charged Gillespie with second-degree murder. They said they had eyewitnesses. Once he was in custody, Gillespie says a St. John police officer went after him to get him to pin the murder on Robert Mailman.
He got me in the office all by himself. He wanted me to make a statement against Robert Mailman. And I said, no, I'm not making no statement. I said, I wasn't there, and I said, I don't think Bob Mailman was there either. I said, we're home fixing my car. He said, you want to protect him? He said, you go down with him. So what could I say? Make up a story?
You weren't going to lie.
I wouldn't do that.
Not telling that lie meant Gillespie would spend the next 2 decades in jail. And even though he wouldn't tell the police that Mailman committed the murder, 2 days later, Robert Mailman was charged anyway. The murder became what everyone was talking about in St. John. The papers wrote about it every day. One storyline was that both men insisted they were innocent. But Mailman and Gillespie were convicted, sentenced to life, and sent to a maximum security penitentiary.
This is in Renews.
So this is in the penitentiary. You're in the penitentiary here?
Both of them, yeah.
Both of them.
That's my cell in Renews. That was my life. The only thing kept me going for the first 10 years was probably revenge. Not to get out to hurt anybody, but just to make them held accountable. I wanted them to be brought before a court, and I wanted them to be shamed in front of the public. That's what I mean by revenge.
In prison, from day one, they worked on getting out. And one day they met this man, Ron Dalton, a former bank manager who'd been convicted of murdering his wife. And he helped them.
I was working in the library. I could fumble my way around a typewriter, an old manual typewriter, and we were writing the justice ministers to try to draw some attention to their case. And Wally used to run poker games inside, and if he made a few dollars, he would use that money to hire a private investigator out in the real world.
Ron Dalton could relate to Mailman and Gillespie because he always said he was innocent too. And he was. 8 years into his sentence, Dalton was exonerated. Once he was free, he began to volunteer with an organization that helps the...
It's funny how they said, how could these innocent men get convicted for a crime that they didn't commit? But then this guy also got convicted of a crime that he didn't commit. And then he is the one who ends up getting them out. It seems like this might be a systemic issue and not just like some random thing that happens. You know, we've talked to like maybe 5 people in this story. 3 of them have been convicted of crimes they didn't commit. Not an outlier in any way.
Wrongfully accused. He made sure Mailman and Gillespie weren't forgotten.
That I don't think a lot of people might understand is that when we're reviewing the files, we're also looking for evidence of guilt.
This is Innocence Canada's only office in the country. It's from here they investigate claims of wrongful conviction by inmates across Canada.
Bobby, he wouldn't shut up about being innocent.
Lawyer Jerome Kennedy remembers the first call he got from Bobby Mailman.
It's an example of a man saying, I am innocent and no one is listening to me. Will you please help?
Right. Looking at the case, Kennedy says it was clear why the police targeted Mailman.
Bobby Mailman was a notorious alleged criminal back in the early 80s in St. John, and he had been acquitted of a couple of fairly high-profile charges. And essentially, they started the investigation with the view that Bobby Mailman was the killer. Now we have to find the evidence to support that. I would simply describe it as out to get Bobby Mailman at any and all costs.
Innocent.
Well, it's also because the police don't like if they have an unsolved murder, right? They do this deductive reasoning thing where it's like, oh, that person is a known criminal. The known criminal must have did it. That it's just this crazy rationalization of crime that they do, where they think that because of like math, basically, that they got the right people. This is how our criminal justice system has worked for a very long time. It's just that now with evidence and like technology, we've gotten away from being able to just like convict people on vibes. But we still do, and in America even more so.
Found that the Mailman and Gillespie case was full of holes. For example, the eyewitnesses who put them at the murder scene admitted they made their stories up.
One thing I learned from this case is how important it is to go to the scene.
Lawyer Bhavin Sodhi found the most damning evidence of all when she flew to St. John and went to the police station.
And they gave us a single file folder. I think it had a couple of envelopes in it, and we didn't think there would be much. But we're flipping through these pieces of paper. And when I looked down, I said, are these receipts of payments? There's no way that the police would keep a ledger of hundreds of dollars of payments made to John Lohman Jr., one of the key witnesses that testified against Robert Mailman and Bobby Gillespie.
So you found proof that the police had been paying the main witness that put the 2 gentlemen away?
Yes. It was incredible. Of all the years that I've been doing this, I've been doing this now for almost 10 years, right? There has never been an instance like that.
So in the end, both eyewitnesses admitted they hadn't seen the murder.
Payments of $100.
And one of them had been paid by police. But if you can believe it, it actually gets worse. Mailman and Gillespie always said that they had an alibi, that they were here at what used to be a car dealership buying a part to fix a friend's car at the time of the murder. Now, the police did an investigation. They found their alibi credible, but they didn't disclose that to the defense at trial. This is a photocopy of the receipt that Mailman and Gillespie got that day. Even though there was so much evidence pointing to a wrongful conviction, Robert Mailman spent 18 years in prison, and Walter Gillespie 21. And it took until January 4th, 2024 to clear their names.
Well, I don't have too much to say, really. You know, I just. Okay. Sorry. I don't know. I remember when we first went in, I said, when we walk out of here, we'll be walking out with our canes. But I don't know that this day was coming up, and I'm glad it did. Glad it's over with.
Thank you.
Good job.
Something to say? Well, he's my brother now. I mean, we've been together for 40 years fighting this. We were hoping to grab our arms and put them up, but I couldn't lift my arm after we come out of the courtroom. I was so exhausted.
The Chief Justice apologized to Mailman and Gillespie. St. John Police haven't. They commissioned a retired RCMP officer to look into the force's handling of the case.
I think that they should have.
Of course they hired a cop to investigate the cops, because that's what fucking crooked police do.
At least recognize what they've done and compensate us now. Hopefully that's what they'll do, and that's what we're fighting for now.
Gillespie says he's trying to figure out how to live as a free man.
I do this as a pastime. I don't.
You sue the pants off of the fucking Newfoundland government. That's what you do.
Think about anything. I just mix all the paints up and see how it comes out. They all come out differently.
Good for you.
I'm hoping maybe get a better apartment. Look at this rat hole. Just a cage in here. It's, you know, just like being in prison, more or less. You know.
Nick, I got.
Sir, you get a nicer apartment by suing the pants off the fucking Newfoundland government, bud. Let's go.
You have some breaking news on this.
Yeah, the lawyer from Innocence Canada, Jerome Kennedy, called me just a few hours ago and said the province of New Brunswick has reached a tentative compensation deal with Mr. Mailman and Mr. Gillespie.
So what'd they say?
I called them both, and you know, I was a little bit surprised by their reaction. Mr. Mailman said, quote, you know, every high I get, I think of my cancer, and it's a low. And if people think we won this, it's 40 years of my life, I didn't win nothing.
What a feel-good story.
They're not wrong. All right, Nick, thank you for staying on this.
You're welcome.
Afghan migrants in Pakistan are living in the shadows, hoping they won't be found. Well, even those born in Pakistan are not safe from deportation.
I'm sorry, but psychological damage has reached the peak. Good night. I'll be back probably Monday.